Hey, welcome back to Diabolic Shrimp, the least professional talk show on the internet. I'm your host, best-selling author, comic creator, and video game designer these days, Joshua Grant. And today, wonderful special show. Our special guest back again for a second round. I guess we didn't scare him off too much last time. Is Prentis Rollins. Prentis is a fantastic artist, award-winning artist. Many of you have likely seen his work at some point. Has drawn a whole bunch of things, especially in the DC universe, several things in the Marvel universe, has his own books. The Furnace was fantastic. It's all about this Dystopia. It's awesome, really, really cool comic book. We're going to talk a bit today about some of his how to draw books. He has two of them. One's coming out tomorrow. All these are in the description below, so definitely support Prentis. Check out his works if you're interested in anything we're talking about. Love to be interactive on this show. So over there in the live, it's this way, I think, over in the live chat there, ask Prentis some questions, put him in the hot seat if you like, give him a shout out. So that's over there. If you're watching this later, thanks for watching. Down below in the comments, send Prentis some comments. I love to share those with him. Now, before we bring Prentis on, a quick look at some of our highlighted books. Now, I can't help it. I got to show off my Another Zombie Apocalypse yet again. I published this about a month ago. Since we're talking comics and art today, I just loved Laszlo Nemeth is my artist and business partner. Just created some beautiful art for that. It's got a whole bunch of different takes on the zombie apocalypse. So that's a lot of fun. If you want to support me and my channel, you can always check that out in the description below. I give a percentage of these to universally good things like childhood disease research. And so our next highlighted book is Keisha and the Rise to Legacy, Book 2, The Infernoverse by T.R. Tells. With great powers unimaginable, will Keisha be the Inferno savior or its downfall? Now, these books just have incredible art. Now, they're not comic books, they're novels, but just beautiful art, really awesome fantasy world. Again, these are down in the description below if you want to check them out. And for our last highlighted book is Worldtorn by Britta Dewey. When 17-year-old Ava Clark revives with increasingly dysfunctional immortal abilities after drowning in the icy Snake River, she straddles the line between living the mortal life she wants or accidentally destroying it. Fans of the dual worlds and convergent story threads in the TV series Once Upon a Time will be right at home with Worldtorn. Worldtorn, again, also beautiful art. I'm a huge art guy these days. And so this is actually a Kindle Vella novel. And so it's going to be kind of like episodic. And so definitely check that out, especially if you have Kindle Vella. If you want to try Kindle Vella, they always have like a free trial, and it's kind of like episodes. It's more like a TV show. So definitely check those out. They're in the description below, the links to those. But he's been waiting in the wings for a bit. Prentis is so excited to get him back on. So let's bring him on. Prentis, welcome back to Diabolic Shrimp.
Hey, Josh.
It's just so great to have you. It's always Christmas for me getting to talk with you. Just your creative mind. Last time we didn't get just enough time. I always I did not have enough questions, I can get to. So it's great to have you back on. Now, Prentis, I know we've introduced you before, but I always love to introduce people through show and tell. Did you happen to bring us anything for show and tell today?
Yes, indeed. Something interesting. I'm in New Jersey now at my and we're in my proper studio. So I'm going to pick up my computer and carry it.
This will be the nicest part of New Jersey anyone's ever seen. No.
It's my drawing board.
Oh, that's awesome.
But
now, is that a standing one, or do you sit and draw, or?
That is a I actually have two. That's just a standing, drawing board.
It's got the trash can next to it. I bet there's I bet there's incredible art in there. I know artists are always oh, this is garbage, and it's better than anything I can do in a month. Oh, I can see the Enterprise. There we go.
Yes, this is the Starship Enterprise. This is a great pleasure to build. This is like the Star Trek shrine, in fact.
Oh, I'm loving this. I'm geeking out with you. I got the Defiant up here. I don't have the Enterprise, but I got the Defiant.
My only regret with this is that I didn't wire it for light at the time that I was. I mean, I've never done that actually, and I'm just not that advanced a model maker. and I don't spend enough time doing it to be able to do that. But it's a beautiful, huge model. Alas, I don't remember the name of the company that issued it. It might have been Model Masters. But this is my favorite iteration of the Enterprise A. But this is the one that I really want to show you. This is
Yeah.
the
Oh, the Nostromo.
that's the Nostromo. Okay, and in a minute I'll tell you an interesting story um, about this model.
Oh,
But you can
fascinating. What
see
what's all that below it?
that is kind of the alien shrine.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
There's
I love this. You're putting me to shame with all my nerd stuff. I was telling Prentice the only thing alien that I had was like I've got my Predator skull over here, but that's the best I can do. I'm loving like I got this stuff in the background, but it's been put to shame. Look at that. I love that. It's got the
that's
map
a
or
poster
the
of the
blueprint.
schematics of the Nostromo. But
That
this
is
is
too cool.
one of my very very favorite things. Um, it's
At some point in this interview for the audience that's watching, Prentice is an alien is going to burst out of his chest. It's going to happen at some point. So keep watching.
all right. Let me just my computer's the battery is kind of okay. There we go. All right. All right. So the interesting story I want to tell you about the Nostromo model is this. Uh, the story as I have it is in 1979, one of the big model manufacturers, it might have been Model Masters, it might have been Revell, one of the mainstream ones, they issued a model of the Nostromo. And it was very quickly yanked from hobby store shelves because it was not properly authorized by 20th Century Fox.
Uh-huh.
How this all happened, who knows? In any case, um, there was this fellow named Joseph Jessup purchased one of these models and had the foresight to. He didn't build it, but what he did was he he made
Like resin.
molds.
Uh-huh.
This guy, I mean, he had some sort of like industrial construction hobby habit. Anyway, he made molds of all the parts. And then my wife, for my birthday some years ago, found this out, contacted the man, had him pour new molds of the parts and send them to her. And I think he's done this any number of times. And I don't know if he's still doing it. His name is Joseph Jessup, Jessop. In any case,
That's
so
incredible. He's like the first 3D printer, like the original one.
kind of. Yeah, that's pretty much, that's not far from the truth. In any case, the parts came in the mail and they were basically just shapes. And so and they were heavy. They were like this polyurethane, they were like stones. That model weighs about 30 pounds.
It's almost
And
as
then
much as the actual Nostromo.
right, yeah. So basically what I did was I used his guidance. He told me what to do. I bought a strip of Venetian blind from Home Depot, spent countless hours cutting it up into little squares and meticulously gluing them all over the thing to give it that finished look that the Nostromo in the movie has, where it's incredibly detailed and intricate. The exterior of the ship with all this, kind of industrial looking tech stuff all over it. And I used toothpicks and straws and God only knows what else to finish the look. And so in the end, what you've got is a pretty authentic looking,
I think it looks great.
interpretation of the Nostromo. At least it's not shaped exactly like the ship is in the movie, but it's close enough. And it was about it was about 8 months I worked on that off and on. It was a labor of love, and it wasn't the only thing I was working. I mean, I was working, but I was also just like in my spare hours working on that, and that was one of the happiest times of my life, just working on that, because that's probably my favorite cinematic starship, that and the Enterprise A.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I just love like I always just love your attention to detail. I'm sure that translates to your art too. I was like, you should just go work in film too. I was like, because that looked incredible. That looked like it could be in be in the movie.
I'm pretty much I'm definitely what you would call a maximalist with the detail instead of a minimalist.
And that's what it's all about. Like I do like concept art for my comics. I do the art that no one will ever see, and I'm definitely not an artist. I never had an art class or anything. It's like it's getting decent, but it's not like anything that I'll ever show anybody. But through drawing, I always find like I'm like, this looks terrible, so I just start adding like millions of details, and then it looks great. So I don't
Yeah.
know. But that's like, oh well, that's just so incredible. That just tells something about you. Again, if you're watching this, comment down below, comment in the live chat if you want to ask Prentis some questions, or give
I've
him a
got
shout out.
a model kit here that I've been waiting to get to for the longest time, and I'm hoping to fairly soon. It's the Nautilus, and this was issued by Pegasus Hobbies.
Oh, sweet. Yes, the
Yeah.
Nautilus. When I was growing up, that was my nickname, was Nemo. I was Brother Nemo. Back in Scouts, when we would like fight in the woods or something. I was named after Captain Nemo before the fish came along. So everyone thinks it's the fish nowadays. They're like, why were you calling
I know,
yourself a
right?
fish?
You know what Nemo means?
So I don't actually.
It's Latin. It just means nobody.
Oh, okay.
That's
Oh, well, great. I was Brother Nobody then. So that is too cool. I love it. So
The
it
interesting
comes
thing
from a
about
squid,
this
huh?
is it's not based on the version
movie.
of the Nautilus that was designed by Harper Goff for the Disney film, which is probably the most famous version of the Nautilus. This is a freshly designed, really kind of steampunk looking version. And the guy who designed his name's on the box somewhere. I'm not going to look right now, but I'm really looking forward to digging into that one fine day.
Oh, that'll be a blast. Well, you just the other night I was talking with some folks about classic horror movies and zombie movies, and I was like, I asked them the question like, what are some things that they do in movie, or they used to do in movies and they don't anymore, and they should bring that back. And that was something we kind of all agreed on, was a lot more that the practical effects and the models. It was just so cool.
Yeah.
They still do a lot of that, and they're getting back there actually. But it's like all the classic movies like Alien, they were just so tactile, and it's just it's interesting. So now it's been some months since we talked last, and like what's new in the world of Prentis Rollins? In fact, you're rolling out tomorrow, like your new How to Draw book, yeah?
Yeah. All right. So that's the biggest thing right now is in 2016, Monticelli Press published this for me, How to Draw Sci-Fi Utopias and Dystopias.
And check this out, if people are watching, like, it's just such gorgeous art, and I just love your visions for both, like Utopia and Dystopia.
Yeah, and they did this really beautiful. I'm just looking for a really nice page here.
Says the artist again, like they're all like amazing, and you're like, I gotta find a nice one.
On, you're sweet. Oh wait, here we go. I think, yeah, like here. This I was really pleased with this. There's chapters in this that are devoted to designing and drawing sci-fi vehicles, characters, monsters, aliens, robots, cityscapes. In any case, they put out this really beautiful volume. It's like 200 pages, and I was really delighted with it. And it did fairly well, and well enough that they wanted a sequel. And here's my comp copy, or I've gotten several now. But this is so yeah, this pub. And in the meantime, Monticelli Press has merged with Phaidon Books, which is one of the biggest publishers of art books in the world. So this was written and drawn by me with with Jacqueline Ching. Wrote this actually has a narrative component. It's all about designing and drawing science fiction characters. And so before I show you more, I'll just tell you a little bit more about the book. The approach that I took was, well, I needed an angle, okay, in order to organize my thoughts. And so what I came up with is two teams of characters, a good one and a bad one. And the good team is called the Alpha Union, and the bad team is called the Omega Legion. And these are basically parallel universe equivalents of one another. It's kind of tying into the old Star Trek idea of a negative universe.
Yeah,
okay?
The Terran Empire.
Right. So like in our universe, you have the Alpha Union, which is composed of 9 people. It's a family essentially. and they are the ruling power in the universe. And in the negative universe, their counterparts are the Omega Legion, and so you've got basically 18 characters altogether, and so there's 18 sections in the book, and each section shows, preliminary design sketches. So, for example, this is Hyperion,
Oh, too cool.
and he is the leader of the Alpha Union. And let me see.
So I'm curious, is because you have 18 characters and you're
Right.
kind of doing like you're doing both like the good and the evil, or if you will, as like alternate versions of both. Like how do you create such a diverse array of characters? Because as I draw, it's like I start to find like I usually put a rule for myself, like this is going to be like kind of a steampunk book, so they all have to have kind of a steampunk component. It's like, but like I find like sometimes I start to get a little bland and I have to like bounce away from that when I'm creating characters. So how do you kind of create this like diverse group of characters?
What I did was I was thinking about just that. I wanted to cover a lot of bases. So, for example, the mother and the father figures in the Alpha universe, Hyperion and Solara, are very much standard kind of superheroes
Mm-hmm.
in their look and in their powers. And then they've got two kids, Phosphorus and Aurora. Phosphorus is very much kind of the science fiction whiz kid, kind of in the tradition of Flash Gordon.
Fun.
Okay, so he's got kind of a more goofy, sort of a retro look. Aurora is very much the it girl. Okay, so she's kind of a superpowered character, but she shops at Urban Outfitters and Sephora. Okay, and then I wanted to have an android character. So I basically brainstormed, a bunch of different approaches to drawing an android, and that's explored in the book. And one of the characters is disabled, okay, and he's basically sort of the mastermind of the group in the sense that he's the computer genius, and he's kind of merged with this flying chair. And then there's a goofy sidekick called Max, who's basically loves chocolate, and there's others. But basically, what I was doing was just kind of assembling reference images from various different movies and comics, and just science fiction franchises and properties that I love, because that's kind of how I work and how I approach
Mm-hmm.
these things. Is I'm always, this is something I say point blank in the book, is I don't really, at the end of the day, I honestly don't know if I've ever really had an original idea in my entire life. And I'm not dumping on myself, because I don't know if any of us ever have. I mean, basically, creativity is a very complicated process, but it all comes from stuff that you sort of take in from the outside. I mean,
Yeah, I start to wonder, like, was there like an original artist? There was like the one guy way in ancient time that had like the first original idea, and ever since the rest of us have just been borrowing from each other.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you go back to like Homer, the guy who the Iliad, which was turned into a pretty good movie starring Brad Pitt called Troy.
Troy.
Okay, so that's like 5,000 years old. And it was probably inspired by the actual Trojan War. But that's kind of like the first piece of written kind of adventure literature in the West. But I mean, he was a pretty original guy, I guess, because back then, 5,000 years ago, you basically were just kind of like picking it, reaching for straws, just trying to come up with something. But yeah, and then you've got somebody like William Shakespeare, who was obviously,
Yeah.
inspired by, God knows, and Michelangelo and Da Vinci, and so I mean, you've definitely got these characters in history whom we're all standing on the shoulders of these giants. Okay, but and then you get down to the present day, and there's so much, out there. It's just this gigantic, overwhelming tsunami of reference material that you can pick and choose from. And so the task at this point is basically sort of having the presence of mind to kind of narrow
Focus
your
it.
focus of vision instead of expanding it, because you've got to sort of tune so much out anymore.
That's
um
true. I was like, and I struggle with that because I bounce all over, even with my own
yeah,
projects. You got all these characters,
right.
and I know, like, as a creator, it's like we are always like very loving into all of our characters, and they're lovingly designed. Like, for you, what I know this is always the worst question, but what is one of your favorites for this book that you created?
I can show you right now. Let me just give me a sec.
You're better at that than me. I'm like, well, I like this person and I like this person, and they're all great.
Okay. This is
Oh
Penumbra.
yes. And if you watch our last video too with Prentis, you can actually see
She was
the
actually she was
trailer.
actually featured in one of those little
Yeah,
social media teaser. Um, I'm very fond of Penumbra. Penumbra is basically the counterpart of Aurora, the it girl in the Alpha Union.
fun.
Penumbra is the bad girl of the Omega Legion, and she is just a troubled, damaged, psychopathic mind-reading telepath, with this, kind of crazy mace weapon that she uses. Um, but I had a great time developing Penumbra because she's kind of like Harley
Harley
Quinn,
Quinn. Yeah, well, and
just,
I
just
love.
bad.
Yeah, I love, especially just these days. I'm coming from an art perspective. It's like just the expression on her face and the
Yeah.
stance, like just that you chose. Is like you can just see that in her, and I just love how that just conveys it right off. And so,
That's her twin brother, Hesperus.
oh,
And
fun.
he's basically, and where I got the idea from him is I wanted to kind of, go to the ninja trough, which is a huge thing these days. I wanted to have a character in there who was basically a ninja, but a science fiction ninja. So he's basically a ninja, armed with um, sort of with basically it's kind of a lightsaber. But he's a pretty cool character, and so I developed the look, of all these characters, and Jacqueline Ching wrote the narrative. There's basically a narrative that goes along with each of these characters, wherein their sort of their inner voice, their inner monologue is revealed, and you kind of she fleshed out the backstory and the history and the voice of these characters, and I
Fun.
gave them their look. And I think that the result is something that's pretty fresh. I mean, it is, and one of the interesting highlights of the book is
Oh,
because
cool.
it
It's
was
like
published by
centerfold kind of thing.
right because it was published by Phaidon. They're used to doing these kind of interesting kind of production things, and so I was able to create these really big 3-page
That is so
foldout
cool. That is so
wherein
cool.
wherein you see the entire team in their world, all together, in these pretty interesting compositions. And so this is the entire Alpha Union, as you can see.
See, that's my dream right there. It's like I just experimented with zombie. I just finally did my very first like 2-page spread. And I was
Yeah,
like, that was my nightmare. But Laszlo was like, we got to do a 2-page spread. And I was like, because I format these things myself and build them myself. And so it's like, and it's such a nightmare when it comes to the printing piece and lining everything up. But I like, for the first time I did that, and I'm just so proud. And a 3-page spread, I'm like, to me, I'm like, the
it
things you could
was it,
do.
it was a challenge editorially, and I had to have numerous conferences with my editor at Monticelli Press. Because we were just trying to arrange the book in just the right way that you could have first the 9 Alpha Union characters presented, and then the 3-page spread, and then the Omega Legion, and then another 3-page spread. And it was really tricky getting it right, getting the page count right, because these things are made in folios of a certain number of pages.
I know, and you have to get like which one is on which page, and
Right.
that's like,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
well, I give you kudos because I think it's actually even more of a challenge when you're having to collaborate across a group of people. Like for me, it was like Laszlo and I were like just working on Zombie together, so it's like when it's just two, it's like we can just go back and forth and like this works, this doesn't, this needs to be or this doesn't. Versus like you said, you had to have a lot of meetings, and it's kind of tricky to get all the pieces in
And
one
the
place.
the other tricky thing was basically it was last February is when I, kind of, you know, agreed to do the book, and my editor said, "Can you do it in 6 months?"
Oh
And,
wow! Oh
and
wow!
I kind of heard myself say, "Sure." Uh,
as I could just see you, Prentice, just like looking longingly at the Nautilus as you're as you're constantly having to work. It's like
what
one
I
day
what
you'll get to the model.
my thought process at that moment was, I'm sure she's factoring, and she's a great Carla Sakamoto. She was a great editor, by the way. I mean, and she was just fantastic. But my thought process was, Carla's got to be figuring in cushion time here. She's got to be figuring in wiggle room. And it turns out, yeah, she did, but just a little bit.
It's down to
Anyway,
you were going
so
Starfleet engineer, right? And Starfleet, they're always like the engineers like, it'll take us like 7 days, or you have 2 hours, and they always like,
Mr.
man,
Scott, do you always multiply your repair time by a factor of 3? Um, and in any case, I managed to do it, but it was 6 extremely intense months, but very happy months, followed by 3 or 4 months of post-production work. And we got it all in under the wire, and we basically hit the scheduled pub date, which I'm delighted about.
do you enjoy having that kind of crunch, or do you enjoy a little bit more of that freedom? Because sometimes I find both have their value.
I with this one, I had a year, which was definitely more comfortable. Um, there is something to be said for working under the gun and having, because when you have a tight deadline, you really have to play to your strengths. And you can't sit there. I mean, if there is such a thing as having too much time, because things can come out looking overdone, worked, and just wrong. And as often as not, I find if you're really having to push, and as I said, having to play to your strengths, you can get some good results, some results that are better than they might otherwise be. And I think that's what happened here. Because I wasn't cutting corners, but I was having to really just, go to those places where I know I can do this right and quickly, and call on, without having to think very much. And so, it came out pretty good, I think. I think it's, in terms of, if you put the two together, this is it's a sequel, but it's also an equal. I mean, and that's really what I was going
And
for.
they're
Was
gorgeous. They're just gorgeous.
I wanted
Again, people
I wanted
watching,
them
check
to
them out.
be I wanted them to be companion pieces that were, as good as one another, and that really kind of spoke for one another. And so I'm satisfied that that's what I got.
So are they set in the same kind of universe, or?
No, this one
Okay.
is the first one, the one on Utopias and Dystopias, is just all over the place.
Uh-huh.
It's not set in a universe at all. It's basically, it's kind of like, it's more like a love letter to science fiction, because
Nice.
I in that I talk about, my feelings and thoughts on science fiction and how it influenced me, and I do that a little bit in the new one. But the new one, this one is just, it's much more focused. It's really all about. It's much more of a kind of a drawing book, and it's for a slightly younger audience. This one is pretty much for ages 12 and up, whereas this one was very much kind of directed at an adult audience, 18 and up, just because of the sort of the detail and the intricacy of the art. In the new book, it's a bit simpler and a bit more restrained in that regard.
So would
So
you be a hero or a villain?
I think
That sound like a villain laugh. I think you might be a villain, Prentice.
that's villain laugh. I would I would probably see myself as being more on the good side. I hope. I'd like to think.
Spoken like a true villain. So you destroy the world on accident, right? And so
Yes.
now, all right. So we were talking about that time crunch, right? Like, like you're no stranger to a time crunch. You used to work. I mean, you've done a lot of work with, especially like DC and Marvel. And I know when you work in those positions, you're always under kind of a crunch and always
Yeah.
under a lot of restrictions. And so, like, what is there any of your like earlier pieces, whether it's with them or even before that, is there any of your earlier pieces that you'd love to revisit or recreate?
Oh God. Yes is the short answer. I'm trying to think of where to begin. All right. So, for example, um, I had the pleasure and the honor of inking an issue of Static for Milestone Media, which was this is a long time ago. This is in the 90s, early 90s. Milestone was a company that was at that time partnered with DC Comics, and they were doing a line of comics: Static, Icon, Hardware, Blood Syndicate, and others. And Milestone is currently undergoing a resurgence. They have a new presence with new art. In any case, I was heavily involved with their first iteration back in the 90s, and I had the honor and the pleasure of inking an issue of. They had a title called Static, and it was about a superhero with electrical powers. And the penciler was Gil Kane. All right, Gil Kane is a Silver Age comics legend. He basically created the Silver Age Green Lantern. And he's a great artist, rock solid. I mean, he's one of those just old time meat and potatoes pencilers who was rooted in solid anatomy and really kind of like John Buscema and John Romita, senior and junior. That kind of school and approach to drawing comics. He wasn't a showboat. He wasn't about a style. He was all about story and just drawing beautiful figures and realistic environments and creating drama with camera angles and dynamic poses. I mean, he just had it all going on. So he's one of those legendary figures from the history of comics. And I was invited, and at that time, I think he was probably 70 plus years of age, but he was still working now and then. And I was invited to ink this issue of Static. And so I did, and I did my level best at the time. Um, and it came out pretty good. But looking back,
Probably just amazing, I'm sure. Every time I hear an artist say pretty good, and with your
yeah,
artwork, it's probably amazing.
but it's one of those things where looking back, and I appreciated at the time the momentous nature of what I was involved in, because I mean it was a rare opportunity. Um, but if I had that to do over, yeah, I would do it different and I would do it better. Um, I was especially nervous at the time because Gil Kane had this reputation for being very dismissive and and contemptuous towards inkers. You know, and so I was a little, and I knew about that, and I never actually met the man at the office or anything. But at the time, I just kind of switched all that off and just kind of sat down and inked the pages like I was just doing any other job. And had a great time doing it. It was an education. But yeah, it's like my skills and style have developed quite a bit in the intervening time, and so that's one thing out of any number I could mention where if I had it to do over, yeah, I would do it differently.
Nice. Well, and like, I sorry, I'm just imagining with Gil Kane. It's like I'm just imagining like J. Jonah Jameson, like Inger, you're fired, get out of here. No.
No, he couldn't. That would have been Dwayne McDuffie, who would have he was the editor in chief, and he would have done that. He was pleased.
That's good. That's good. Well, all right. So like talking about like I'm just thinking it's amazing that you're able to just like switch off. Like I'm that guy that kind of like starts to psych myself out. I'm a really shy, kind of timid person, actually, believe it or not. And it's like, and at my core still, even though I became an actor and it got me out of my bubble, but it's like, that was always just a challenge to me. It's like learning to focus in and just pretend I'm somebody else. And that's what helped me in acting. But you know, like kind of what you say, focusing in and just kind of doing your work and having an education. But I was like, that's such a challenge to do. But like, there's other challenges in art, right? It's like, what's one of your biggest challenges in creating art? And like, I would say, like, what's the hardest thing for you to draw? Like, for the life of me, cannot do hands. I'm like artificial intelligence. I'm like, I add an extra like finger or don't have an extra finger, and it's always just weird looking. Like, what's your challenge personally in doing
There,
art?
there's a number. One is right off the bat, procrastination. I'm a world class, galaxy class procrastinator in the sense that,
Assignment manager. That's what I call it. Assignment management. You
yeah,
learn.
yeah, yeah. Especially when it's a self generated project, I also psych myself out quite a bit, and I find that with both writing and this ties in with the whole tight deadline thing. When you got a tight deadline, you don't have the luxury of doing that, and the longer you do that, the worse it gets, is what I find. The longer you procrastinate, and psych yourself out, you just become more and more and more, sort of anxious and hung up on how badly you're going to crash and burn. And so I find that, and this goes with both writing and drawing, that you can't sit there, kind of waiting for the muse to sing. You basically have to just sit down and start. And even if it means just putting marks on paper, because and then just seeing where it goes. Because in both writing and drawing, the big thing is most of it is rewriting and redrawing. And when you've got something to work with, no matter how bad, there's only one way to go, and that's up. But if you've got nothing to work with, you got nothing. So I find that, if you are procrastinating and hung up and feeling anxious and dumping on yourself and feeling like this is never going to work, your only hope is to just, say to hell with it, sit down and start drawing. And sometimes that means just start free drawing, whatever comes into your mind. And sometimes it means looking at some reference material that you find really impressive and pleasing, and just changing it a little bit, and starting from there.
That's
So
my
that's
entire process these days. It's like zombie is really just my like taking a zombie apocalypse and just shifting it ever so slightly, or like
there's
the
there's
Lost Boy is
nothing
just Peter Pan, but in like
there's
meets
there's
Batman.
nothing there's nothing wrong and everything right with doing that. And with something like zombie apocalypses, I don't need to tell you that, there's so much of that stuff, but it doesn't matter, okay? Because there's so much of everything now. In Star Wars style material, Avengers style material, romance material. If you think about the fact that it's all, from a certain point of view, been done to death, you're just going to squash your own creative impulse. And so what you got to remember is, it's not the story, it's the telling. I know that's an old cliched saw, but it's true. You're not selling the steak, you're selling the sizzle. Okay, you're selling your approach and what you've got to say. And the zombie trope, the zombie thing, the approach, it is just that. It's basically just a means of saying something fresh that's coming from you.
That's right.
So
I added some sizzle, baby.
yeah,
And so,
yeah, yeah.
well, all
So
right.
so
Well,
that's all very general. Getting back to I mean, there are specific things, yeah, that you said that you have trouble drawing hands. The human hand, is in fact, um, it's probably, along with the face, the most difficult part of the human body to convey on paper, convincingly, for all kinds of reasons. Not least just the fact that it's so complicated, the hand. and the face is so subtle with the number of muscles lending themselves to the expression of however many emotions. This takes endless practice, and I still struggle with it. Drawing faces. One thing I found, just a little tip, and somebody kind of clued me into this years and years ago, was when you are drawing a face or a figure or hands and you think it looks pretty good, um, hold it up to a mirror. Okay, take the drawing and literally hold it up to a mirror. um, and this is something if you're working digitally, you can simply flip it on your screen. And the reason you do this is because we are all either right or left biased. And so distortions that we can't see when the thing is oriented normally will suddenly appear when it is flipped.
That's
Um,
fascinating.
it is, because our brains literally are not wired uh, to see the way something is wonky. There was an artist named I'm sure he's still working. I'm not. Howard Porter, who in the '90s was, and he's a great. I mean, he was doing JLA during one of its very best-selling runs in the '90s. Great artist, but there was this wonkiness to this style. All of his, and he was pretty clearly very right-handed. Um, because he was constantly drawing these figures in kind of three-quarter, um, presentation, and they all looked slightly off, but they were consistently off, which made it okay. It kind of scanned as a stylistic flair. But I was always looking, and I inked him for an issue or two of, I don't remember what, in the late '90s. Um, but I was always looking at his work going, wow, because he had this really kind of wonky thing going on, but it was definitely a result of his particular handedness and the particular way his brain was kind of processing and seeing the world. And I don't know if he held his own work up to a mirror, but it might have looked
He was
even
like,
a lot.
just shade all that, shade it right out. And so
But
I love this. I'm going to hold all my work. Like, I just do the concept art. Like I said, no one will ever see. And it's always like my proportions are all over the place. Like half the time
yeah.
they're like one arm is longer than the other, but I'm going to hold these up to a mirror. Maybe they'll actually look better if I like
Let me ask
take a
you
mirror and
something. When you're drawing, are you working with a tablet or on paper or both?
Oh, I'm old school paper and pencil
Okay.
guy. When I write and when I draw, it's all paper and pencil, and then I ink it with. I cannot shade for the life of me though, and that's where the magic happens.
Right.
And then I put it in the computer. I scan it and I just do some cheap coloring. And this is all just so I can show whatever artist I'm working with. Like this is my general idea of. I'm more like costume design is more what I do.
No, hallelujah. I mean, I'm all about paper and I mean, all the characters in both of my sci-fi drawing books were done pen and ink on paper.
So do you ever do like tablet or any of that nowadays?
Oh,
Or
oh, quite a bit. I mean, they were colored using a tablet, using the art program that I favor is Clip Studio Paint,
okay.
and I use a Wacom tablet. So I have uh this is
Yeah,
volume
the
2.
Jekyll
I
Island
I showed
Chronicles.
you this last time. It was
Yeah, and
volume
I
2.
interviewed the one
Steve
of the
Nedved,
authors. Yeah, and so
the writer and creator.
Alex Schwartzman there, and so
Yeah, yeah. This was entirely, and this is a big deal for me. It was the first thing that I ever did entirely.
and
Uh,
it has gorgeous art by the way too. And
Thanks.
so
Yeah.
again, if
Uh,
people are watching this, definitely check out Prentis's work down below. I have to
yeah.
keep putting that plug in there because I love your art.
Oh, but the another one of the virtues of working with a tablet is in turn, getting back to drawing hands and faces. I'm always, sometimes when I'm drawing a hand, I'm right-handed, so I will draw my left hand. I will put my left hand in whatever, dynamic pose it's got to be in, and just look at it and draw it. But with a
Mine
tablet,
just get worse when I do that. I don't know. It's the
really,
thumb. I always have like my weird like anger. I like shoot an angle out with the thumb. There's always this massive thumb. So I always just draw them in a fist, and that works for me. I don't know why.
yeah.
All my people are just angry. They all just have fists.
But in terms of just like reference, when you're having difficulty with faces and hands, just Google, Google faces, Google. There's infinite. If you just Google like angry faces or happy faces, anything will come up on Pinterest or Reddit. I mean, you just it's all out there. It's all over. There's too much of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's so for you though, it's like speaking of, it's like what's a piece of your art that you hope no one will ever see?
Oh God. Nothing really. I mean, all press is good press, and no, I mean, everything that I have ever had published over the past 30 years, I'm delighted for people to see. There's nothing. Oh God.
There's none of those haunt you at some point. It's like I have like one or two where I was like, oh, I was like,
There's a few. I mean, there's a few issues. Back in the Milestone days, I inked Hardware, which was one of their titles, for 20 or 30 issues. I don't know. It was a lot. And then I inherited the book as the penciler, and so I was penciling the book until the end of its run, and I penciled 10 or 12 issues.
Wow, Prentice, you're allowed to procrastinate at this point in life. I was like,
No,
all these things that you've done, I was like, that sounds like so much work. So I'm like, you're allowed to procrastinate.
I was teamed up with a couple of inkers that I wasn't really pleased with, and they did not flatter my penciling. And so that's the kind of stuff, pages from those I would never post on social media, because I'm just not looking at them. They just make me unhappy, just because I was unhappy at the time with how they came out, and I said as much at the time. But it's all dust in the wind. I mean,
Yeah.
it's all a long time ago.
Yeah. Oh, sorry to bring up the old wound here.
No,
I'm sure they look gorgeous though. Once again, I'm hearing from Prentis Rollins that you weren't happy with it. I'm sure it's like the most beautiful thing.
It's basically that's life in the comics biz. I mean, when you're putting together issues for Marvel or DC Comics, there more than ever, it's a team effort. You've got, at least back in the day, back then you had your editor, your writer, your penciler, your inker, your colorist, and your letterer. And the letterers at that time were all working old school. They were doing it by hand. Guys like Steve Dittrow and John Workman. I mean, these were just like pros, and that was their lives. I mean, they were basically just lettering, and they would do it on the boards, on the piece of Bristol board. And so you can see these old pages on, for sale at comics conventions, where it's all there. It's this piece of original art with the ink line art, the camera ready line art, and the lettering done by hand with machine like precision by these guys.
Amazing, yeah.
And they were craftsmen. I mean, they were, and it's still done that way to a certain extent, but more and more that's all being taken over by fonts.
Mm-hmm.
In any case, so you've got this team of guys, and at any one of those stages, the train could have been driven right off the rails, and that's, it was a happy event when everybody did a splendid job, and you had this beautiful comic at the end of it. But sometimes, the penciler would be great, the inker would be great, the color would be beautiful, and you would get a lettering job that for whatever reason was rushed and amateurish, and that's the stage at which the thing went off the rails.
That's the bar I go for with all my work, is just rushed and amateurish. If I hit the rushed and amateurish, then I think I'm good. At the end of the day, I publish it. No, so going back to that process, I mean, because it's such an art, even like you said, the lettering back in the day, whereas nowadays, like a letters or a dime a dozen, you can actually like, like you said, a lot of it's digital, a lot of it's fonts now, and so like, is there anything you miss from the more classic process that you wish we would still do, and is there something that you're happy has kind of gone away?
Okay. Let me tell you what I miss first. I'm really pleased that I was one of the people in sort of the last generation, I think, of comics artists who got to experience what um, making comics was like for somebody in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. In the 90s and early 2000s, I was living in New York, and we were still making comics at that time the way they did it in the 70s, in the sense that I could walk freely into the offices of DC, pal around with the editors, pick up a bunch of new pages to ink, go home and ink them, walk in and drop them off. And we were doing it on paper, pen and ink, old school. And that was beautiful. And it's one of the things that I treasure most is just the memory of doing that. And that was back when DC, I think Marvel is still headquartered in New York. DC has now moved to LA. And and ever since 9/11, everything changed. You couldn't just walk into the offices anymore. Everything became much tighter security. Just the whole mood changed, and it only got worse with time.
Uh-huh.
So I'm glad that I had that experience, and I remember it fondly, and I do miss it. What I don't miss is the flip side of that, which is back then it was still very much an old school boys club, and it was a male dominated, and I think to a certain extent it still is male dominated industry, and several people that I won't mention were basically Me Too'd. People, editors that I had no inkling at the time that they, were in point of fact, abusive, sexist people who abused their power over underlings
Uh-huh.
in very inappropriate ways. They were lost their jobs as a result, thankfully. And I'd like to think that all of that is in the rear view mirror. I hope it
Uh-huh.
is. But I can definitely say that when back then when I was working heavily with DC and Marvel in the 90s and early 2000s, it was very much an old school boys club to a much greater extent than now, and it's regrettable, but that's changing as it's changing everywhere else in our culture.
Yeah, we're actually really in a really interesting shift right now, and like a huge paradigm shift, not only with the
Yeah,
technology and the process, but also, like you said, like kind of like with the diversity piece and and the viewpoints towards that. So it's a really interesting time actually for
yeah.
comics. We're always running out of time, and I never get to everything I want to. We'll have you back on, I think, in 6 months, and we'll continue our epic quest to
That'd be great.
unlock the knowledge of Prentis Rollins. But like but so like what I was like, I guess rounding out like like you just got your newest book out there, we just talked about that, right? Like how to draw.
Right.
What's next for you then?
Let's see.
Finally you can build the
I've
Nautilus.
got a graphic novel that's in the can that I'm working on getting published. That's kind of been a work in progress for a while. I'm starting up another self-generated project. I just finished doing a poster for the BBC for an episode of Inside Number Nine,
Nice.
which is a big show in the UK. Um, that's it for the immediate future. I do want to mention a number of convention appearances that I'm going to
Yeah,
be
definitely. I
doing.
was like, how can we support you? Because Diabolic Shrimp is very
I
supportive.
haven't, I, the last time I was at a convention was pre-COVID. It seems like yesterday, but it was 2018 at San Diego Comic-Con. I'm going to be at MCM Comic-Con in London, exhibiting on Artist Alley on July 25th and 26th, selling and signing copies of the new books and various other things. I'm going to be at the Miami WonderCon. I'll tell you the dates for that in just a second. That is, it's the Florida SuperCon in Miami, and that is June 30th and July 1st and 2nd. And then I'm going to be at Contropolis in Massachusetts, in Boston, on the 16th, 17th, and 18th of May. And let's see. Sorry, I'm just
I was gonna say, like, if you go to a convention, Prentis is likely going to be there. I was gonna say
Well,
you're going to all of them.
I'm going to be at, no. It's just a bunch in a short period of time, and I'm also going to be at the Contropolis in New Jersey. But I don't. That's also in June. Anyway, you can basically Google it, because it's basically it's in Secaucus, Contropolis. It's a new show in New Jersey. That's coming up pretty soon. And on May 6th, I'll be in Dobbs Ferry they're having it's called the Dobbs Ferry Con at the Municipal Library on Dobbs Ferry on May 6th.
Fun.
So looking forward to that's a one-day event. But that's my so if anybody is in any of those areas and interested in meeting me, I'd love to meet you. And so I'm especially looking forward to MCM in London and the Florida SuperCon. Those are two really big shows, and
yeah, well, in between those, you're probably just maybe like gonna get an hour of sleep somewhere, right? Like you
between just life and kids and everything, sometimes it feels like that, but
build that model, Prentis. Next time we're just going to do a show, and in live time, I'm just going to have you build the model just to give you some time, right? So...
I could sit there and do that and kind of yak away, and autopilot. It's great talking to you, Josh.
Oh, it's so great to talk to you too.
Fantastic host.
Thank you. I was like, you'll have to come out. Colorado Springs Comic-Con is coming up in August. If you're ever out this way, come say hi. I dress up as J. Jonah Jameson. I yell at all the Spider-Men. So I'll yell at you too. Like, you're an inker. You're fired.
And by the way, before you let me go, I read Another Zombie Apocalypse. I loved it. It's fantastic. It's crazy.
You're required to say that. Ask Prentis at one of the conventions.
I genuinely did. I found it genuinely kind of a fresh approach, which is a hell of a thing in the on the whole zombie scheme of things, and really interesting, and an interesting blend of sci-fi and horror. So
thank you. Yeah, well, I tried to get that Asimov in there, and it was my love letter to zombies and sci-fi thriller,
Right.
So, well, Prentis, it's been just a wonderful time having you back on again. Like I'm very serious. I was like, we'll have to get you back on in like another 6 months, and you can tell us about all the conventions, after you get a bit of a break. So, well, Prentis, thanks for being back on Diabolic Shrimp.
Thank you, Josh.
All right, well, hang out for a second, Prentis. I'm sending you back to the netherworld. Well, that was Prentis Rollins. Again, support him. Just fantastic art. I absolutely love his books. I mean, just listening to him talk today, I learned something as a young artist. I've never had an art class, so I'm definitely going to hold all my pictures up to a mirror, and then I'll probably cry because all my proportions are horrible, and so they're probably all need work. But yeah, all of his links are down in the description below. If you were watching this live, thank you so much for checking out. If you're watching this later, down in the comments below, you can always leave him a comment. Just another really quick word from our highlighted books, Worldtorn by Britta Dewey. This is on Kindle Vella. It's like watching a television show where they have more like episodes. You can actually get like several of them free, and then you have to pay for episodes if you enjoy it. So it's actually a really cool platform for like checking things out. And if you don't enjoy it, you can just move on to the next one. But Worldtorn is just interesting with powers. And so definitely check that out. The links are in the description below. Keisha and the Rise to Legacy, just this beautiful, like really awesome fantasy world. Watch my previous video. You can actually see a different Keisha cover as as well. Just gorgeous art as well. So definitely check those out in the description below. And if you want to support me or this channel, hit all those buttons, ding that bell for noties, make it burn, whatever they say these days. And my books are in the description down below as well. Reach out to me on diabolicshrimp.com if you'd like. And I always love connecting with people. I give a portion of everything I make from this to universally good things like childhood disease research, or we planted 14 trees recently, which is really cool for Earth Day. So, well, this has been another Diabolic Shrimp. Have a good night.